Yeah, so today we'll start with chapter 15. अध्याय 15 से हम स्टार्ट करेंगे. पुरुषोत्तम योगा, द योगा ऑफ सुप्रीम पर्सन. तो एक्चुअली हमने जैसे बताया पिछले अध्याय में भगवान ने बोला कि कैसे भक्ति परफॉर्म करके ना वी कैन ट्रांसेंड द मटेरियल मोड, हम तीनों गुणों से परे हो सकते हैं. और उससे हम तो जब हम भगवान को प्राप्त कर लेंगे तो उसमें ब्रह्मा रियलाइजेशन, परमात्मा रियलाइजेशन अपने आप आ ही जाता है. तो लेकिन अगर हमें मतलब भगवान की भक्ति प्राप्त करनी है और भगवान से हमें अटैचमेंट बनाना है तो पैरेलली हमें ये भी करना पड़ेगा कि one needs to also develop detachment from the material world. So basically this is parallel process, attachment to Krishna and detachment from the material world. So it's a parallel process, दोनों समांतर क्रिया है. तो भगवान यहाँ पर शुरुआत के 6 श्लोकों में ये भौतिक जगत का वर्णन करते हैं. तो अगर आप ये अध्याय का तात्पर्य और सब पढ़ेंगे, 15वें अध्याय में सिर्फ 20 श्लोक है, ठीक है, उसका तात्पर्य आप सब पढ़ेंगे. सारी फिलोसफी संक्षिप्त में इसमें कवर कर ली है प्रभुपाद जी, सारी अभी तक जितनी भी भक्ति की जितनी भी फिलोसफी है सारे तात्पर्य में कवर हो चुका है, ठीक है. तो इस श्लोक की शुरुआत में भगवान क्या करते हैं पहले कि ये भौतिक जगत को वट वृक्ष के साथ कंपेयर करते हैं. तो उसके बारे में हम देखते हैं. तो भगवान यहाँ पर बोल रहे हैं, श्री भगवान उवाच ऊर्ध्वमूलम अधः शाखाम अश्वत्थम प्राहुरव्ययम् छंदांसि यस्य पर्णानि यस्तम वेद स वेदवित्. बोल रहे हैं, द सुप्रीम पर्सन ऑफ गॉडहेड सेड, it is said that there is an imperishable banyan tree that has its roots upward, its branch down, and whose leaves are the Vedic hymn. वे सब पेड़ हमने कहाँ पे देखा होगा? जिसके मूल ऊपर है और उसकी शाखाएं नीचे हैं और उसके जो पत्ते हैं वैदिक हिम से. कहाँ देखने को मिलेगा? One who knows this tree is knower of the Veda. अगर ये वृक्ष के बारे में कोई जान जाता है तो उसको क्या बोलते हैं? He is the knower of the Veda. तो अभी तक हमने देखा शुरुआत से लेके भगवान ने 14 अध्याय तक भक्ति भक्ति भक्ति, सब जगह पे भक्ति फोकस किया. डू द एक्टिविटीज एंड ऑफर रिजल्ट टू कृष्णा और डायरेक्टली डू द एक्टिविटी इन रिलेशन टू कृष्णा. ज्ञान प्राप्त करो और भक्ति में लगो सब जगह पे. और बीच के 7 से लेकर 12वें अध्याय तक भगवान ने भक्ति पे ही फोकस किए. डायरेक्टली बोल रहे भक्ति भक्ति भक्ति, मन मना भव मद भक्त मध्याजी माम नमस्करो. तो इसीलिए आफ्टर द डिस्कशन ऑफ इम्पोर्टेंस ऑफ भक्ति योगा, वन में क्वेश्चन, व्हाट अबाउट द वेदा? This explained in this chapter that purpose of Vedic study is to understand Krishna. What is the purpose of Veda? That is also given in this chapter. And conclusion of the Veda in 3, there is 3 श्लोकी भगवद गीता, 15.16, 17 and 19. 3 श्लोकी भगवद गीता है, वो भी दिया गया है यहाँ पर, जो सारे वेदों का सार है. वेदों के बारे में, वेदों को संक्षिप्त में बताया है, वेदों का पर्पस क्या है उसके बारे में बताया है. Therefore, one who is in Krishna consciousness, who is engaged in the devotional service, already knows the Veda. So, जो भक्ति में लगा हुआ है वो कंसिडर कर ले, माना जाता है कि वो उन्होंने वेदों को जान लिया. वेदिश्च सर्वे अहमेव वेद्या वेदांतवित् वेदांतकृत एव च. तो entanglement of this material world is compared here to a banyan tree. ठीक है. So for one who is engaged in fruitive activities, there is no end to the banyan tree. अभी ये वट वृक्ष के साथ क्यों कंपेयर किया गया है? आपने वट वृक्ष देखा है जो बहुत पुराना वट वृक्ष हो? मैं नर्मदा के किनारे पे गया था गुजरात में, वहां पे कबीर वट करके जगह है, तो कबीर वट बोलते हैं उसको लोग. और कलकत्ता में एक बोटनिकल गार्डन में एक वट है. इतने बड़े बड़े वट वृक्ष है. एक ही वट वृक्ष था, लेकिन अभी इतने सारे उसके ब्रांच हो गए हैं, तो कौन सा ओरिजिनल है वही पता नहीं चलता। कहाँ से शुरू हुआ, कौन सा मूल, कौन सी मेन ब्रांच, मुख्य शाखा कौन सी, वही पता नहीं लगता। तो इसीलिए भी आप देखेंगे तो भौतिक जगत में हमारे कर्म कहाँ से स्टार्ट होता है हमें पता ही नहीं चलता। कि भौतिक भौतिक जगत में हमारा क्या बोलते हैं, भौतिक इच्छाएं कैसे शुरू हुई भी पता नहीं लगती हमें। तो ऐसा वृक्ष कहाँ देखने को मिलेगा, बेसिकली तो क्वेश्चन होता है। So have you ever seen a tree with roots upward and branch down? Question. In Bhagavad Gita 15.1, this material world is compared to upside down banyan tree. ऐसे पेड़ हमें कहाँ देखने को मिलता है? Yes, there is such a thing. Reflection of a tree in a reservoir of water. बेसिकली यहाँ पे कहना चाहते हैं आध्यात्मिक जगत रियल है और मटेरियल जगत उसका रेप्लिका है। आध्यात्मिक जगत पे वो सबसे जो ऊपर है वो सबसे नीचे यहाँ पर है, अब देखेंगे। तो भौतिक जगत में लोग सेवा मतलब नौकर समझते हैं, नौकरी समझते हैं, मतलब नौकरी मतलब जो बात जॉब करे उसकी बात नहीं कर रहा, लेकिन किसी को सेवा करना उसको तुच्छ मानते हैं। लेकिन आध्यात्मिक जगत में सेवा भाव सबसे ऊपर ही माना जाता है। ठीक है, तो यहाँ पे वट वृक्ष को इसीलिए भौतिक जगत को वट वृक्ष उल्टा वट वृक्ष के साथ इसलिए कंपेयर किया गया है कि हमारा जो भौतिक जगत है आध्यात्मिक जगत का रिफ्लेक्शन है, उसका प्रतिबिंब है। ठीक है, तो जैसे अभी मैंगो की सीजन आ गई, तो अभी मानिए एक नदी के किनारे आम का पेड़ है या तालाब के किनारे आम का पेड़ है, तो आम देखोगे पीला पीला आम लगा हुआ है, अभी पक्षी ने खाया नहीं है या मनुष्य ने तोड़ नहीं लिया है, अभी पेड़ के साथ लगा हुआ है। ठीक है, और क्रिस्टल क्लियर वाटर है, तो रिफ्लेक्शन में भी ऐसे लगेगा रहे तो सचमुच सच्चा आम है। और उसको आप लेने जाओगे उससे टेस्ट नहीं मिलेगा, आप नीचे से तोड़ोगे, तोड़ने की कोशिश करोगे, कितना भी अंदर पानी में डूब के मर जाओगे लेकिन फल नहीं मिलेगा उसका। तो कहने का मतलब है भौतिक जगत को इसलिए ये जो वृक्ष का जो प्रतिबिंब है उल्टा वट वृक्ष के साथ उसको कंपेयर किया गया है। और आप जो मैंने वो वट वृक्ष की बात की, उस वट वृक्ष में मैं गया था, पता ही नहीं लगता अरे ओरिजिनल कौन सा है। देखिए वट वृक्ष में क्या होता है, ऊपर से भी मूल आते हैं और जमीन में जाते हैं वापस, तो ओरिजिनल क्या है वही पता नहीं लगता। और जो उसकी शाखा है उसको अलग अलग प्लेनेटरी सिस्टम मतलब जनलोक, तपोलोक, महालोक, स्वर्गलोक, चंद्रलोक वगैरह से कंपेयर किया गया है। ठीक है, तो बेसिकली ये अध्याय में मैंने जो बताया ये भौतिक जगत से हमें कैसे डिटैचमेंट डेवलप करना है, तो डिटैचमेंट डेवलप करने के लिए भौतिक जगत क्या है उसके बारे में पहला वर्णन किया गया है। ठीक है, spiritual world versus material world. Spiritual world like a real mango tree on the bank of river, and material world like a reflection of that mango tree in water. So our material body is a bad copy of our spiritual body. Material world is perverted reflection of the spiritual world. We already discussed this. Real marble, fake marble, real currency, fake currency, real mango, imitation mango, spiritual beauty, material beauty. So this is the like a comparison between spiritual bliss and suffering. Negative axis like a vertical axis. ठीक है, so beauty in this world is only skin deep. Even if you remove 1 mm skin, we'll never see. हम देखेंगे भी नहीं, अगर वो भक्ति होगा तो छुएंगे भी नहीं उसको। ठीक है, so that's what Krishna has compared here. The material world is an upside down banyan tree. ऊर्ध्वमूलम अधः शाखा अस्वत्थम प्राहुर अव्ययम छंदांसि यस्य पर्णानि यस्तम वेद स वेदवित्. If someone knows this tree, then is knower of the Veda. So, जो पत्ते हैं उसको बोला गया है छंदम से यस्य पर्णानि, तो उसको वैदिक हिम्स बोला गया है छंद. So its branches spreading up and down is nourished by the three modes. Its twigs are sense object. And secondary roots extending everywhere bind the human society to fruitive action. So it's a karma bandhani. Secondary roots, they are again, tied in this material world. It's very difficult to gahana karmana gati. It's very difficult to find where it has begun. That's why they are compared to this. That secondary roots are compared to that कर्म बंधन, हाँ कर्मानुबंधनी. ठीक है, इस प्रकार से भगवान यहाँ पे बता रहे हैं. ठीक है. So now in the next verse, he's more elaborated, like he extended the explanation of this material world. भौतिक जगत का और थोड़ा वर्णन करते हैं इस श्लोक में. तो बोल रहे हैं अधः श्रोध्वं प्रसृतस्य शाखा गुण प्रवृद्ध विषय प्रवृहत प्रवालः अधस्य मूलानि अनुसंततानि कर्मानुबंधिनी मनुष्य लोके. तो बोल रहे हैं यहाँ पर क्या बता रहे हैं, the branches of this tree extend downward and upward. ऊपर नीचे दोनों तरफ लगी हुई है. nourished by the three modes of material nature. ऊपर जो है उसको स्वर्गलोक बोला गया है, नीचे उसको पाताल लोक बोला गया है, और बीच में जो है उसको मृत्यु लोक. उसको पानी कहाँ से मिलता है? तीन मोड़ों से, तीन गुणों से. और ट्विग्स मतलब उसको क्या बोलेंगे हिंदी में, आप समझ गए. ट्विग्स आर द ऑब्जेक्ट ऑफ द सेंसेस. उसको क्या बोलते हैं, जो भी है आप समझ गए. ट्विग्स आर द ऑब्जेक्ट ऑफ द सेंसेस. This tree also roots going down. This tree also has roots going down, and these are bound to the fruitive actions of human society. Okay. तो बेसिकली क्या होता है कि so now in the next verse Krishna will describe about how to cut this tree. It's very, very difficult, right? Basically this is the description of this whole material world. There is a तीन लोकों का जो वर्णन है, स्वर्गलोक, पाताल लोक और मृत्यु लोक, उसका वर्णन है. तो ऊपरी जो शाखा है उसको स्वर्गलोक से कंपेयर किया गया है, और नीचे की जो शाखा है उसको तपोलोक से कंपेयर किया गया है, और बीच में जो आता है उसको मृत्यु लोक है. और जो हरे हरे पत्ते हैं उसको वेदों के साथ छंद, वेदों में जो छंद दिया है उसके साथ कंपेयर किया गया है. और वहां पे क्या है, जो ट्विग्स है उसको सेंस ऑब्जेक्ट, और टिप्स ऑफ द ट्विग्स आर कंपेयर टू सेंसेस. Tips of the twigs are compared to senses and twigs are compared to sense object. यहाँ पे उन्होंने भौतिक जगत का वर्णन कर दिया. ठीक है. तो अगले श्लोक में भगवान बता रहे हैं कैसे उसको कट करना है. न रूपम असह्य तथोपलभ्येत न अंतो न च दीर्न च संप्रतिष्ठा अश्वत्थम एनम सु विरुद्ध मूलम असंग शास्त्रेण दृढ़ेन छित्वा ततः पदम ततः परिमार्गित्वयम् यस्मिन् गतान निवर्तानि भूय तमेव च अद्यं पुरुषं प्रपद्ये यतः प्रवृत्ति प्रसता पुराणी. तो बोल रहे हैं the real form of this tree cannot be perceived in this material world. Basically it's a reflection of the spiritual world. Okay. And no one can understand where it ends. उसका अंत कैसे होगा पता ही नहीं लगता. जैसे हमने चौथे अध्याय में एक चीज चर्चा की थी, आपको याद होगा, किम कर्म किम कर्मेति कवयोप्यत्र मोहिता ततते कर्म प्रवक्ष्यामि यद्यत्व मोक्षस्य शुभात् कर्मणांशपि बुद्धव्यंशपि विकर्मणा कर्मणांश गहनो कर्मणा गति। तो वहां पे भगवान बता रहे हैं कि क्या करना चाहिए क्या नहीं करना चाहिए। इवन द इंटेलिजेंट are bewildered in determining what is action, what is inaction. Now I shall explain to you what action is, knowing which you shall be liberated from all misfortune. This is in 4.17. क्या बता रहे हैं? कर्मणः अपि बुद्धव्यम बुद्धव्यम च विकर्मणः अकर्मणांश अपि बुद्धव्यम गहना कर्मणा गति। कर्म की गति समझना बहुत मुश्किल है। तो भौतिक वर्ल्ड में कैसे शुरू हुआ मतलब और उसका अंत कैसे होगा, मतलब भौतिक जगत मतलब हमारे भौतिक बंधन का अंत कैसे होगा, बहुत मुश्किल है। So the real form of this tree cannot be perceived in this world. No one can understand where it ends, where it begins, or where its foundation is. तो मैं जैसे वट वृक्ष की बात की, वो है नेशनल हाईवे 8 से थोड़ा साइड पे जाते तो वहां पर वट वृक्ष है। कहाँ से शुरू हुआ कहाँ उसका अंत है वो भी पता नहीं लगता। ठीक है, लेकिन भगवान बोल रहे हैं but with the determination one must cut down this strongly rooted tree with weapon of detachment. But with determination one must cut down this strongly rooted tree with the weapon of detachment. So basically it's our choice. Okay, it is our choice that we see so much complication, so much attack, so much playing game, all those things in the world, but it's our choice that whether we want to be affected or not affected. It's our choice, by reacting to the dictation of the modes. We want to continue our material existence or we want to stop our existence. So we will be dictated by name, fame, happiness, distress, ठीक है, मान अपमान, लूज विक्ट्री, जय पराजय, ये सबसे हम will be dictated. So these are because of 3 modes. It's our choice whether we want to be affected or not. तो वो हमारी चॉइस है। ये क्लियर कर लो, ये हमारी चॉइस है, बस इतना दिमाग में डाल लो। कुछ याद रहे ना रहे टेंशन मत लीजिए, ठीक है। और कभी इतना डिक्टेशन आ गया तो वी हैव टू लाइक एटलीस्ट भगवान को याद करिए उस वक्त, ठीक है। So therefore, thereafter one must seek that place from which, having gone, one never returns, and there surrender to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, from whom everything began and from whom everything is extended since time immemorial. तो यहाँ पे बहुत अच्छे से बताया है. So it is now clearly stated that real form of this banyan tree cannot be understood in this material world. हम समझ नहीं पाएंगे कैसे है ये. Since the root is upward, the extension of the real tree is at the other end. When entangled with the material expansion of the tree, one cannot see how far the tree extends, nor can one see beginning of this tree. Yet one has to find out the cause. I am the son of my father is son of such and such person, it is he. By searching in this way, one comes to Brahma, who is generated by the Garbhodaksha Vishnu. Finally, in this way, when one reaches the Supreme Personality of Godhead, that is the end of research work. So purpose of all scientific research is to find the source of our origin. Everyone is trying to find, most of the scientists, many people are trying to find what is our source. One is to search out that origin of this tree, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, through the association of persons who are in knowledge of that personality of Godhead. Then by understanding, one becomes gradually detached from this false reflection of reality, and by knowledge, one can cut off the connection and actually become situated in the real tree. By the sword of knowledge, Gyan ki talwar. Krishna used this word, sword of knowledge. Can you remember where he used? somewhere it is a weapon of knowledge, not sword of knowledge, like the weapon of knowledge. So we have to use that sword of knowledge and cut this tree. So that's why Krishna is telling this knowledge in brief, that first at least not to cut it, we should know in little bit, थोड़ा तो पता रहना ही चाहिए, ठीक है. So and again I'm saying that by the sword of knowledge one can cut off the connection with this tree and actually become situated in the real tree. And that begins with our determination. First of all, we have to desire. Desire is very, very important. Okay. So it is this, there is one sentence, Prabhupada writes, one can be free from entanglement within this material world by cultivating a transcendental desire to enter into the spiritual world. So it is said, it's very easy. It is very, very easy. बहुत मतलब आसान है. It is very easy to detach from bad habits. It is very easy to be detached from the bad habits. But what is difficulty? Difficulty is to develop the desire to be detached from sense gratification. It's very easy to be detached from sense gratification, but it's very difficult to develop the desire to be free from the sense gratification. So at least we have to develop that desire. And develop that desire, and Krishna will what? Krishna will strengthen, he'll give you faith in those desires. For even Krishna give the desire for demigod worship, whoever is desiring to worship demigods, Krishna give them faith. He says in 21st verse, I am in everyone's heart as a super soul. As soon as one desire to worship some demigod, I make his faith steady to that, so that he can devote himself to that particular deity. उसी प्रकार हम भगवान को अगर यहाँ पर वो इच्छा डेवलप कर लेते तो हमारे भगवान उसमें हमारी श्रद्धा बढ़ाएंगे. So first and foremost important thing is to develop the desire. At least इच्छा कर लो, बाकी अपने आप होने लगेगा. The word asanga is very important in this connection because the attachment for sense enjoyment and loading it over the material nature is strong. So why we are in this material world? Because we have attachment for sense enjoyment and loading it over the material nature. That's why. आज मैंने एक क्लास का लिंक भेजा था ग्रुप पे. तो as soon as we until we stop controlling, will be controlled by material nature. But as soon as we develop the desire to be controlled by the Supreme Personality of Godhead, will be free from the control of the three modes of from this material world. That's what Krishna says. Devi esi guname mum maya dhrite mame vai prapadyante maya me tantarantite. Therefore, one must learn detachment by discussion of spiritual science based on authoritative scripture, and one must hear from the person who are actually in knowledge. It's very, very important. That's why many times we feel that अरे हम इतना पढ़ते हैं याद नहीं रहता. Don't worry, just keep reading. Keep reading. हम लोग भी पढ़े थे, कुछ याद नहीं रहता था, लेकिन जरूरत पड़ती तो याद आ जाता है. Krishna gives that intelligence. Krishna says in this chapter, Krishna will say, "Sarvasya chaham hridasinna vishtu mattas mutra jnanam apohanam cha." From me comes remembrance, forgetfulness, mattas mutra jnanam, and knowledge. कृष्ण बोलते मुझमें से आता है याद, क्या बोलते हैं उसको हिंदी में, याददाश्त और भूलना, और जो ज्ञान है भगवान में से आता है. तो हमें एटलीस्ट पढ़ते रहना चाहिए ये सब चीजें. As a result of such a discussion in the association of the devotee, one come to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. और इम्पोर्टेंट है भक्तों के संग में करो ये. Then the first thing one must do is surrender to him. I have seen most of the people has come in the association of the devotee just by reading the books. Krishna said, when you read the books, that desire is developed because your desire to lording over the material nature have been slashed by the sword of knowledge. Desire, when you read the books, even without coming in touch with any devotee, if you are not in touch with any devotee, but if you continue reading the books, at least written by Srila Prabhupada, then what will happen? The knowledge, sword of knowledge will automatically act. It has been automized. Okay, we are in the high-tech world, right? So those sword is automized and automatically cut the desire to lording over the material nature, desire for sense gratification. So those will be cut. And when you develop that desire, to serve the Krishna by reading these books, Krishna will automatically send the devotees, or Krishna will bring you in the association of the devotees. It will happen. So then the first thing one must do is surrender to him. The description of that place, whence having gone one never return to this false reflected tree, is given here. Okay. So the personality of Godhead Krishna is original root from whom everything has emanated. To gain the favor of personality of Godhead, one has only to surrender, and this is a result of performing devotional service by hearing and chanting. Just by hearing and chanting करोगे तो ये सब हो जाएगा. This is the cause of the extension of material world. This has already been explained by the Lord himself. Aham sarvasya prabhava, I am the origin of everything. Therefore, to get out of the entanglement of this strong banyan tree of material life, one must surrender to Krishna. As soon as one surrender unto Krishna, one becomes detached automatically from the material extension. Okay. So here it is said, Tam eva chadyam purusam prapadye yasmin gata na nivartante bhuya. वो लोक में जाके will never return back. So I'm reading again. The real form of this tree cannot be perceived in this world. No one can understand where it is, where it ends, where it begins, or where its foundation is. But with the determination, one must cut this strongly rooted tree with the weapon of detachment. Thereafter, one must seek that place from which, having gone, one never returns. And therefore, their surrender to the Supreme Person of Godhead, from whom everything began and from whom everything has extended since time immemorial. Basically, this was the how to be detached from this material world and its little description of spiritual world. When you go there, you will not return. That my description is given. Okay. So in the next verse, how to that surrendering process is given. How you can surrender? Krishna has spoken here. You have to surrender. Sorry. That. Yeah. So he has told us to approach Lord Krishna. Surrender to Krishna. He is mentioned here. Okay. So in the next verse, he talks about surrendering process. Nirmana moho jita sanga dosa adhyatma nitya vinivritta kama danve vimukta sukha dukha sange gachanti yamuda padam avyayam tat. तो बता रहे हैं, those are free from false prestige, illusion, false association, who understand the eternal, who are done with material lust, who are free from the dualities of happiness and distress, and who unbewildered know how to surrender unto the Supreme Person, attain to that eternal kingdom. So this is a surrendering process. How to attain, how they can surrender to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Basically, the surrender process is described here nicely. The first qualification is that one should not be deluded by pride. This is pride come before fall. So abhiman nahi hona chahiye. That is very, very important. Because the conditioned soul is popped up thinking himself Lord of the material nature, it is very difficult for him to surrender into Supreme Personality of Godhead. One should know by the cultivation of real knowledge that he is not the Lord of material nature. The Supreme Personality of Godhead is the Lord. When one is free from delusion caused by pride, he can begin the process of surrender. Nirmana moho jita sanga dosa. Okay. Nihi man moho. False prestige. For one who is always expecting some honor in this material world, it is not possible to surrender to the Supreme Person. Pride is due to illusion, for although one comes here, stays for brief time, and then goes away, he has the foolish notion that he is the Lord of the material world. He just makes all the things complicated and he is always in trouble. Because of the pride, considering oneself the bhokta, one itself the controller. The whole world moves under this impression. Yudhishthir Maharaj was asked, I told that many times, right? There is one verse. Here it is said, Ahani ahani lokani gachanti ta yamalayan sestathavaram icchanti yam aschyaryam athaparam. So Yudhishthir Maharaj was saying, what is the most astonishing thing in this world? Yudhishthir Maharaj, he was very advanced, spiritually realized king, immediately replied, this is the most wonderful thing that everyone is thinking that I shall live. Ahani ahani lokani gachanti. He's seeing everyone, every moment that somebody has died, he is going to the crematorium or to somewhere else, but is thinking that I am sure, I am secure, I am in safety position. This is the most wonderful thing. The same thing is repeated here. Okay. So people are considering the land, this earth, to belong to human society, and they have divided the land under the false impression that they are the proprietor. Prabhupada said, nowadays people are talking about United Nations, but every year the number of flags are increasing in the United Nations. Then what kind of United Nation is there? Means one flag is increasing, means one nation is separated. So how you can say that is United Nations? Many times he says in lecture. So one has to get out this false notion that human society is proprietor of the world. And one is free from such a false notion. It becomes free from all the false association caused by familial, social, and national affection. This faulty association bind one to this material world, and after this stage, one has to develop spiritual knowledge, and one has to cultivate knowledge of what is actually his own and what is actually not his own. Okay. So, and when one has understanding of these things, of things as they are, he becomes free from all dual conceptions such as happiness, distress, pleasure, and pain. He becomes full in knowledge. Then it is possible for him to surrender to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. In Oxford University, there is one book about religion published by Oxford University. They say those who are believing in the religion, especially faith, this kind of spirituality, not religion, but let's say rather than saying religion, spirituality, they're more satisfied, they're more happy. They've written there. I'll share that quote if I find. Why? Because he developed this attitude. and he become full in knowledge, then it is possible for him to surrender to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. But bhakti is so powerful. It is said in Srimad Bhagavatam, the byproduct of bhakti is bhakti develops jnana and vairagya. Jnanam vairagam uchyate. So when you have Krishna consciousness, you automatically develop that knowledge and detachment. So that's what here he said in this particular verse. He has explained the process of surrender. See, in the next verse he talks about spiritual world. That okay, so when you have to cut and when you have to search for that spiritual world, which is the goal of surrendering process. So what is that spiritual world Krishna is talking about? A search for the place. After going there, he will not return, and Krishna give the description of that place here in the next verse. न तद्भास्यते सूर्यो न शशांको न पावकः यद्गत्वा न निवर्तन्ते तद्धाम परमं मम. So that supreme abode of mine is not illumined by the sun or moon, nor by fire or electricity. Those who reach it never returns to this material world. So Krishna spoke about this in the which one? That fourth verse, right? After going there, will not return. She is giving the description. He has given the description here that the spiritual world is self-effulgent, and that Brahma Jyoti effulgence, who is the basis of that effulgence? Krishna himself, Brahmano Pratishtaham. Okay. So they are self-effulgent. That's what Krishna is telling here. So in the next verse, in this 6 verse, qualities of the spiritual world, Krishna Loka or Goloka Vrindavan is given. And in the next verse onwards, Krishna talks about how the living entities are being entangled in this material world, in this banyan tree. Why? So that is explained here in the next verse. She says, Mamev vamso jiva loke jiva bhuta sanatana manasashtani indriyani prakriti sthani karsati. The living entity in this conditioned world are my eternal fragmental parts. They are my mameva amsho, mama eva amsaha, my fragmental particle. So Krishna says in the 7th chapter, 4th verse, what he says? Bhumirapannalo vayu khamano buddhi revacha ahankariti amme bhinna prakriti ashtada. So material world is my separated energy. What he says about this living entities in the next verse, he says, aparayam itastum anyam prakritim vidhi me para jiv bhuta mahabahoya idam dharite jagat. There is another superior energy of mind which comprises the living entity who are exploiting the resource of this material inferior nature. So those living entities are mamev amsha. They are my amsha. And material energy is separated energy. It's a completely different characteristic, but amsha has some characteristic match with of which they are part. Yeah. So Krishna described here that in this world the identity of the living entity is clearly given. Till now, who we are. So we have discussed we are not this body, we are soul. Okay, then where we are connected, So it is very clearly mentioned we are the amsha of the Supreme Lord. We are fragmental parts of Supreme Lord. Okay. The living entity is fragmental part and parcel of the Supreme Lord eternally. It is not that he is assumed individuality in his conditioned life and his liberated state becomes one with the Supreme Lord. It's not like that. So he is eternally fragmented. And it is said Sanatana. Okay. According to the Vedic version, the Supreme Lord manifests and expands himself in innumerable expansion, of which primary expansion are called Vishnu Tattva and secondary expansion are called living entities. So Vishnu Tattvas are known as Swamsa and living entities are known as Vibhinnamsa. Okay. So in other words, the Vishnu Tattva is the personal expansion and living entities are separated expansion. By his personal expansion, he is manifested in various forms like Lord Rama, Narasimha, Varaha, Vishnumurti and all, predominantly deities in the Vaikuntha planet. Separated expansion, the living entities are eternally servitors. The personal expansion of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the individual identities of the Godhead are always present. Similarly, the separated expansion of the living entities have their identities. As a fragmental part and parcel of the Supreme Lord, the living entity also a fragmental portion of his quality, of which independence is one. So living entity also have independence. That's free will. That's free will. So every living entity as an individual has his personal individuality and minute form of independence. So now our conditioning and our happiness depends on how we use that independence. Okay. So by misuse of that independence, one becomes conditioned soul, and by proper use of independence, he is always liberated. Okay. That's why even after performing certain amount of devotional service, let's say you have advanced till 40%, and we commit a Vaishnava Aparadh or something, there are difference between sinful activity and Vaishnava Aparadh. When we perform sinful activity, then that will go away by holy name. But we should not chant the holy name to eradicate the sinful activity. That is different thing. But when we do Vaishnava Aparadh, our advancement in spiritual life will be delayed. That will be stagnant. Suppose you are going like this thing, your graph, ideally your graph of advancing bhakti with respect to time should be infinite. Also dy by dx should be infinite. But ideally that is not possible unless and until you get krupa of some bhakta. When you are krupa siddha, your dy by dx infinite means, or what should I say, you immediately advance. But when we are a practitioner, sadhana bhakta, then that depends on our intensity of our attitude to go back to Godhead. जितना हमारे intensity है, that much will be the slope. So same way, so it depends on our attitude, that how we use that independence, whether we use it for serving Krishna or if we utilize it for our sense gratification. That is the choice. And if you make a right choice, we'll advance in Krishna consciousness. I was talking about Vaishnava Aparadh. So when we make a Vaishnava Aparadh, or dy by dx will become zero, slope will become zero. That will be flat, horizontal, rather than advancing. So unless and until you ask for forgiveness from that particular Vaishnava, you'll not be able to advance. Okay, that is our choice. Whether we want to, every action, that's what I said. We have a choice. Every step is opportunity to surrender unto Krishna. Our choice hai. That depends, whether we want to choose that or not. So in either case, he is qualitatively eternal, as the Supreme Lord is. In his liberated state, he is free from the material condition and is under the engagement of transcendental service unto the Lord. Okay, and in his conditioned life, he is dominated by the three modes of material nature. That's our choice. We have to become Das. We have to become Das, Das, Das. It's our choice whether we want to become Maya Das or Krishna Das. It's our choice. आगे कृष्ण को लगाना है, आगे माया को लगाना है. किसी ना किसी के तो हम दास बनना ही है. So in this condition, life is dominated by material modes of nature. They forget the transcendental loving service of the Lord. Basically, forget serving Krishna's senses, they start serving his senses. That is the problem. As a result, he has to struggle very hard to maintain his existence in the material world. Very clear, huh? The living entity is not only human being and the cats and dog, but even the greater controllers of material world, Brahma, Lord Shiva, even Vishnu are all part and parcel of the Supreme Lord, Shirodakshay Vishnu. So they are all eternal, but not temporary manifestation. So the word karsati, struggling. So here, Prakriti Sthani karsati, struggling hard, is very significant. The conditioned soul is bound up as though shackled by the iron chain. Just like that, na? Means when you are shackled by the iron chain, what will happen? You have a freedom. You have freedom to few, you can say few meters or few feet, whatever. You can move. You might have seen the prison cell. वहां पे किसी को हथकड़ी से बांध सकते, उसके पास फ्रीडम होता है, इतना इतना हिलेगा, थोड़ा फ्रीडम है. So degree of freedom is less. Okay. So उनको थोड़ा फ्रीडम मिलता है तो he understand यार मुझे ज्यादा फ्रीडम मिला, or maybe he has seen more freedom and he goes inside, then he realizes that I have less freedom. So he is bound up. So that shackle is bound up by false ego. Chain, binding chain, shackle is false ego. Mind is the chief agent which is driving him in this material existence. Mind is the chief agent. So that's why Bhaktisiddhanta Thakur used to tell, beat your mind with shoes 100 times in the morning and broom in the night for 100 times. Maybe it's reverse. Maybe I could not remember with what in the morning. But he said 100 times you should beat in the one of the things, either broom or shoe. And morning 100 times you should tell. You should explain that mind. So because why mind has minds? What is the mind activity of mind? Thinking, feeling, and willing. Based on the, so when he thinks to gratify his own senses, then he will be shackled. So when the mind is in the mode of goodness, his activities are good. When the mind is in the mode of passion, his activities are troublesome. And when the mind is in the mode of ignorance, it travels in the lower species of life. It is clear, however, in this verse that the conditioned soul is covered by the material body with the mind and senses. Manasashtani indriyani, manasashtani indriyani, with the 6 senses, okay, including mind, which includes the mind. Prakriti sthani karshati. Due to conditioned life, the living entity in this conditioned world are my fragmental part, but due to conditioned life, they are struggling very hard with 6 senses, which includes the mind. The mind is greatest enemy if you don't control. Okay. And when the mind is in the mode of ignorance, it travels in the lower species of life. It is clear, however, in this verse that the conditioned soul is covered by the material body with the mind and senses. And when it's liberated, the covering perishes, but the spiritual body manifests itself in its individual capacity. So when the living entity gives up his material embodiment and enter into spiritual world, he revives his spiritual body, and in his spiritual body he can see the Supreme Personality of Godhead face to face. He can hear and speak to him face to face. He can understand the Supreme Personality as he is. From Smriti also it is understood. The spiritual planet, everyone lives in bodies featured like a Supreme Personality of Godhead. As far as bodily construction is concerned, there is no difference between the part and parcel living entity and expansion of Vishnu Murti. In other words, at the liberation, the living entity gets a spiritual body by the grace of Supreme Personality of Godhead. The word Mame Amsa, the fragmental part and parcel of the Supreme Lord are also very significant. The fragmental portion of the Supreme Lord is not like some material broken part. It's not like a broken part. Huh? We have already understood in the second chapter that the spirit cannot be cut into pieces. The fragment is not materially conceived. It is not like matter which can be cut into pieces and joined together again. That conception is not applicable here because the Sanskrit word Sanatan is used. Bhuta Sanatana. The fragmental portion is eternal. It is also stated in this beginning of the second chapter that each and every individual body, the fragmental portion of the Supreme Lord is present. The fragmental portion, when liberated from the bodily entanglement, revive its original spiritual body, the spiritual sky in the spiritual planet, and enjoy the association of the Supreme Lord. It is, however, understood here that the living entity, being the fragmental part and parcel of the Supreme Lord, is qualitatively one with the Lord, just as the part and parcel of the gold are also gold. Okay. So basically, that is the description. No, mind's power to determine the Jeeva's future. It's our choice. Basically, choice is ours. Okay. So next verse, Krishna says that when we receive body, he says, Sariram yad avapnoti yachapi utkramana itsvara gruhi vetani samyati vayurgandana vasyata. बोल रहा है, the living entity in the material world carries its different conception of life from one body to another, as the air carries aroma. This it takes one kind of body and again quits it to take another. That depends on the desire in the subtle body. Whatever kind of desire you have in the subtle body, that kind of gross body will achieve. Okay. So these purports are really powerful. This summarizes whole philosophy. So here, Saridam yad apnoti. Okay. Yad chapi utkramat itsvara. So living entity is mentioned as Iswara here, the controller of his own body. If he likes, he can change his body to higher grade, and if he likes, he can move to lower class. Basically, choice is ours. If you want to become Krishna Das or Maya Das, minute independence is there. The change his body undergoes depends upon him. कैसा शरीर मिलेगा हमारे ऊपर है, वो हमने देख लिया 8वें अध्याय में, right? At the time of death, the consciousness he has created will carry him on the next type of body. If he has made his consciousness like that of cat or dog, he is sure to change to a cat's or dog's body. And if he has fixed his consciousness on godly qualities, he will change into the form of demigod. And if he is in Krishna consciousness, he will be transferred to Krishna Loka in the spiritual world. He will associate with Krishna. So basically, choice is our. This false claim that after the annihilation of the body, everything is finished. The individual soul is transmigrating from one body to another. This present body and present activities are background of his next body. One gets different body according to karma, and he has to quit his body in due course. It is stated here that the subtle body, which carries the conception of the next body, develops another body in the next life. And this process of transmigrating from one body to another, struggling while in the body, is called karsati, struggling for existence. Okay. Basically, here it is mentioned about change of body. So what will happen when you keep changing your body? So sotrum chaksusparsanam charasanam granam evacha adhishtaya manaschayam visayanu upasevate. The living entity thus taking another gross body obtains certain type of ear, eye, tongue, nose, senses of touch, which are grouped about the mind. Again, the senses are grouped about the mind. And he thus enjoys a particular set of sense objects. Okay. So now who can see these changes and all? That is explained in the next verse. उत्क्रमणान्तं स्थितं वापि भुजजानं वा गुणान्वितं विमूढा न अनुपश्यन्ति पश्यन्ति ज्ञानचक्षुषा. The foolish cannot understand how living entity can quit his body, nor can they understand what sort of body he enjoys under the spell of the modes of nature. But one whose eyes are trained in the knowledge can see all these things. Basically, the word Jan Chakshu is very, very significant. Without knowledge, one cannot understand how the living entity lives his present body, and nor what form of body he is going to take in the next life, nor even why he is living in a particular type of body. And this requires great amount of knowledge understood from Bhagavad Gita and similar literature heard from bona fide spiritual master. And one who is trained to perceive all these things is fortunate. Every living entity is quitting his body under certain circumstance, and he is living under the certain circumstance. He's enjoying under certain circumstances under the spell of material nature. As a result, he is suffering different kind of happiness and distress under illusion of sense enjoyment. Basically, sense enjoyment. यही संस्पर्शजा भोगा दुख योनो एवते आदि अंतवंत कौनते न ते सुरमते बुधा. So person who are everlastingly fooled by lust and desire lose all power to understand their changes of the body and they stay in the particular body, and they cannot comprehend it. Those who have developed spiritual knowledge, however, can see that spirit is different from the body, it is changing and is changing its body and enjoying it different ways. A person in such a knowledge can understand how the conditioned living entity is suffering in this material existence. We should have knowledge. And therefore, who are highly developed in Krishna consciousness tried their best to give this knowledge to the people in general. That's why preaching work is very, very important. When we preach, other will develop this knowledge. First of all, हमारा उद्धार होगा, बाद में दूसरों का भी उद्धार हो सकता है, कर सकते हैं. Therefore, those who are highly developed in Krishna consciousness try their best to give this knowledge to people in general. For their conditioned life is very much troublesome. They should come out of it and be Krishna conscious and liberate themselves to transfer to the spiritual world. Okay. Without Jnana Chakshu, we cannot understand why we are changing body and what spell we are changing the body, how the living entity is quitting his body. And again he says again same thing. Yatanta yoginas chainam pasyanti atma ni avasthitam yatanto api akrutat mano nenam pasyanti अचेत सह. यहाँ पे बता रहे the endeavoring transcendentalists who are situated in the self-realization can see all this clearly. Endeavoring transcendentalists who are situated in self-realization can see all this certainly. But those whose mind are not developed and who are not situated in the self-realization cannot see what is taking place, though they may try. Krishna again says in 2 point, if you remember, Bhogeresware prasaktanam taya pahat chetasa vyasatmika buddhi samadho na vidyate. Says in 2.44 that in the mind of those who are too attached to sense enjoyment and material opulence, they are bewildered by the such things. The resolute determination for devotional service to the Supreme Personality of Godhead does not take place. They cannot understand all these things. Okay. So there are many transcendentalists on the path of spiritual realization, but one who is not situated in the self-realization cannot see how things are changing in the body of every living entity. The word yogin is significant in this connection. In the present day, there are many so-called yogis, and there are many so-called association of the yogis, but they are actually blind in the matter of realization. They are just for health and bodily exercise. They're simply addicted to some sort of gymnastic exercise and are satisfied if body is well built and healthy. They have no other information. They are called yatanto api akrutatmanha. Even though they are endeavoring in so-called yoga system, they are not self-realized. Such a yogi cannot understand the process of transmigration of the soul. Only those who are actually in the yoga system and have realized the self, the world, and the Supreme Lord, in other words, the Bhakti yogis, those engaged in pure devotional service in Krishna consciousness, can understand how things are taking place. Okay. So we'll end here today. So we saw here, just I'll summarize what we saw. So basically we saw about this material world. When is compared to Urdu Mulam Adha Sakha Aswatham, that upside down banyan tree, the reflection of the tree in the reservoir of water and all. So basically it is a material world. So material world is perverted reflection of the spiritual world. That's what we saw. Okay. So then we saw that the real form of this tree can't be perceived. Okay. And how can we cut this banyan tree? With the axe of detachment, with the sword of detachment, with the weapon of detachment, whatever you want to say. Then Krishna explained the surrender process. Nirmana moha jita sanga dosha. Cut the tree with the axe of detachment. That's what he says. In the verse 5, the surrendering process is given. Okay. Then in the verse number 6, the qualities of spiritual world or Goloka Vrindavan is given. Since the living entity will not be satisfied until he reaches the supreme abode, because it is his constitutional position to be related with Krishna, is explained in 15.7. So he says, Mame Vamso, 5 types of loving action. Mame Vamso, Jeev Loka, Jeev Bhuta Sanatana. Living entity are part and parcel of the Krishna. And they are related to Krishna with 5 rasas: Sakhya ras, Madhurya ras, Dasya ras, Sant ras, Dasya ras, Madhurya ras, Atsalya ras. Yeah, 5 rasas are there. When the living entity choose to serve Krishna, it is called akarma or devotional service. Akarma free one from the cycle of birth and death, and also awards him the supreme destination. So mind's power to determine the jiva's future. Basically, it's our choice. If we choose right, then we will get right body. If we choose wrong, then we'll get wrong body, which is not compatible with Jivatma. How the changes are taking place is mentioned, we discuss. And how we go to another body, that is also we discuss. So that's why, disparity in this world, we say someone is rich, someone is poor, someone is strong, someone is weak. Because of this, our choice. Someone is beautiful, someone is ugly, someone is healthy, someone is diseased. And we also discuss soul's transmigration, who can and who can't see. So that way we end here. We will complete this chapter tomorrow. There are only 20 verses. So if anyone have any question, comment, feedback. then you can write in the chat or you can ask me personally.